I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Fred Thiel, CEO of Marathon Digital Holdings. Fred, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time today.
Great to be here.
You're very welcome. Let's dive straight into a little bit on yourself first, because I'm very interested in your experience in leading up to Marathon Digital Holdings and how you got into the Bitcoin mining space. So let's just hear a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into Marathon and the rest of the operations.
Sure. So basically started in tech in my late teens, writing software in a commercial bank in London. Actually, as I was in my senior year of high school, had always been interested in computers. And, back in those days, you wrote software on punch cards. It was kind of an older model, but just loved technology and, have been in the tech industry ever since. So nearly 40 years at this point. Wow. Across all spectrum, everything, hardware, software, enterprise software, SaaS, internet media, digital media, ad tech, online games, IoT, semiconductors, storage, pretty much every single part of the industry you can think of. Went kind of from, software engineering into product management into kind of, general management, and then became a CEO and just have always loved creating value in companies. Have always loved new disruptive technologies. I took a company public in 2000. Company's name was Lantronix, or is Lantronix. It still exists today. Was one of the pioneers in providing technology to connect devices to networks so you could create IoT solutions. And went from there into the online game space, and really pioneered some of the technology that went into some of the original kind of multiplayer gaming networks, and then also digital ad tech. And I've spent time, ran a fund for a private equity firm focused on enterprise software applications, kind of in the mid kind of 2007, 2008 period. Did that for about the life cycle of that fund. Have started venture funds. Still a general partner in a venture fund today called Navigate Ventures, which focuses on B2B SaaS software. Sat on a lot of boards, advised a lot of private equity firms, and just I've always loved leveraging technologies to do new things, whether that's, AI, was very early in the kind of modern AI space, involved in sort of predictive analytics technology companies that were about predicting patient outcomes in healthcare. And I've just loved kind of any type of technology that was kind of disruptive or would cause some new innovation. And I got exposed to Bitcoin originally back, I'm going to say 2014-ish, something like that. I had a former CTO who worked for me who, told me he was fed up with kind of the existing world of fiat and government control and was going all in on this thing called Bitcoin. And I thought, well, that's curious. And then, lo and behold, a few years later, totally orange-pilled, I was focused on building a company that was, think of it as kind of an exchange or a global order book that could trade across multiple exchanges all over the world. And due to lack of regulatory clarity, even back then in the U.S., built that offshore in Liechtenstein, where they were much more open to Bitcoin and Ether as kind of currencies from a perspective of, the only licensing you needed back then was foreign exchange trading license, which was easier to achieve. And at that point, got connected to Marathon Patent Group, which is the predecessor to Marathon Digital Holdings. And a good friend of mine had just been named CEO in 2017 and asked me to join the board because he was going to take the company from being a patent troll into Bitcoin mining. And so joined the board in early 2018, and then worked with Marek Okamoto, the then CEO, to kind of recapitalize the company. And then in April of 2021 became CEO of Marathon, and we began really scaling. And so, super excited about where we are today. And I was employee number 4 in 2021. And today we're a little over 40 people, I think, at this point, and
Cool.
continuing to grow quite nicely. So,
Wow, incredible experience, Fred. And it sounds like you've done a little bit of everything, and you choose to focus on Bitcoin mining now, which is really cool to see. And I think a lot of people that first get into Bitcoin, that they don't really connect with the hardware or the mining part of it. They don't really think a lot about it, but it is so important, because without it, there would be no Bitcoin. There would be no Bitcoin network. And I'm sure you've sort of sat into that as you've become the CEO and seen that it's probably continuing to grow the industry. I'm curious on the operations of it. Are you focusing mainly on just mining the Bitcoin, and how wide do the operations extend in Marathon?
yeah. So today, when we initially started, we were your typical small scale miner hosting with third-party hosting providers. And over time, that model has evolved where now we're migrating more and more to developing our own sites from the ground up. Our operation in UAE is the first of those sites where, designed and built by us, together with our partners. We've spent a lot of time developing some core technologies to make ourselves more efficient. As you get bigger, using third-party solutions for things becomes less efficient, right? So we developed our own pool. Why did we develop our own pool? Well, most mining pools are designed to support miners that are using everything from old S9 machines all the way to the state-of-the-art kind of S19 XPs. And so they have to deal with all sorts of inefficiencies because they have to have a lowest common denominator effect. In our case, we could design a pool to operate specifically for our requirements. And because we don't have any third parties in our pool, it's just us, we don't have to have any of that extra software overhead in the pool to deal with validating third parties, validating their hashes, things like that. Mm-hmm. So that gives us slight little, tiny little efficiency gains. And then we designed our own firmware for our miners so that we could overclock them, underclock them, and dial them up and down as we needed, because the stock firmware doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. And then we designed custom controller boards for our miners. And then we co-developed immersion technology specifically for, in the case of our operation in UAE, operate in an environment where the ambient temperature is 45 to 50 degrees centigrade, or well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, mm-hmm. With very high humidity. And the pilot that we ran in UAE, actually, it ran for over 100 days before an engineer or a human being had to go in and touch anything. So it was huge success in that regard. So we're very focused on a technology-centric approach to Bitcoin mining. How do we make it more efficient? How do we go all the way down to the ASIC? And we made an investment in a company called Auradine, which is very active in the hardware space in this area. And we think that, the efficiency gains that technology can provide over time are going to drive energy consumption down significantly lower. If you look at our fleet, our efficiency come mid this year will be about 24 joules a terahash. So think 24 watts per terahash, where the average industry miner is using 43, 44 watts or joules per terahash. So significantly more energy efficient. What that means is we can operate in economic environments where the price of Bitcoin is low or the cost of energy is high, mm-hmm. where other miners necessarily can't. And with a halving coming up next year, it's very important for us to be at that bleeding edge of efficiency. And then, we're busy scaling the business, not just domestically, but also internationally. UAE is our first international site, and we're looking at sites on a bunch of different continents at this point. So,
mm-hmm. Wow, very cool. And I was reading, is there 8 operational areas right now?
Yeah, so predominantly today, we've been in West Texas. We've added a couple of other sites in Texas. We have a big site in North Dakota, in Ellendale, that's been coming online here kind of weekly over the past few months. And so we'll be pretty much about 60-ish% Texas, 40% North Dakota. And then as UAE comes online later this year, that'll start diluting us even further from Texas. And our goal is to kind of longer term be at 50-50 domestic international hash rate. and be able to operate in multiple different climate zones. While Texas is a very, it has been an ideal location because of how ERCOT and the markets work there, this just extreme surplus of renewable energy that's stranded there that is perfect for Bitcoin mining. The challenge is, it's concentration risk. As you build a bigger business, then all of a sudden, if you have a major storm or a heat event where you have to curtail for an extended period of time, that can have a really detrimental effect on your revenues. So by diversifying locations, diversifying climates, we kind of hedge against that a little bit, and you decrease risk. And one of the things I learned in private equity and venture capital was you always want to maintain your optionality while decreasing risk. So that's one of the things we're very focused on, is that diversification.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when I think of international expansions, I would think, cold climates, which in the past I've heard some of these Bitcoin miners, they open up the doors and like they help with natural cooling of the mining operations. But the UAE would be the opposite of that. But of course, I'm guessing the cost of electricity and, subsidies and from the government's innovation probably weigh factors in there as well.
Well, it's interesting. It's actually not those things. UAE and the Gulf region, it's very hot in the summer and they need to use a lot of air conditioning. And in the rest of the year, they don't need that much. So specifically to UAE, 4 gigawatts of energy at peak in summer, 1 gigawatt otherwise. So you've got this 3 gigawatt swing, which is stranded energy because unfortunately, or fortunately, in UAE, most of the water is from desalination. So they're taking seawater and they're desalinating. How do they do that? Well, they use the heat from the energy generation. And if they're not generating a lot of energy, they can't do a lot of desal. So they have to kind of keep this energy generation going, even though there might not be offtake. And they just added a 5 gigawatt nuclear reactor to their energy mix. And so now they have lots of energy. And so they need to find a way to consume the energy, create baseload consumption, which we do. And then at the same time, because we're now providing more steady revenues to the power company in the off-peak times, the government has before been subsidizing energy to the consumers. And now the revenues from the Bitcoin mining, their ownership interest in this will essentially help mitigate that subsidy so that the consumers will still get low power cost, but the government won't be having to pay for it. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship. And this is kind of how we like to work with partners around the world, is go into areas where there either is stranded power or there's excess energy. And we can take advantage of working with the local power utility, the government, to create value add that exceeds kind of the cost, if you would, of having Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, that's really cool because I feel like on the surface, people think that, it's a huge inefficiency altogether to be mining Bitcoin. But from what I understand, it's actually, you're able to solve some of the inefficiencies of just the current electrical grid, and that inserting Bitcoin strategically into certain spots will actually have a benefit for all parties.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you were to look at the number of renewable energy projects that are kind of in the pipeline, these projects need transmission or interconnect, as it's technically called, which is how you connect a solar farm or a wind farm to the grid so they can sell the energy. The problem is there is a lack of interconnect. Matter of fact, there is currently a backlog of over 2 years to get interconnect for the renewable energy projects domestically in the US that exist. And so an estimate by the EIA, which is a government institution that sort of does research on electrical data in the US, they're forecasting that only 14% of the renewable energy projects in the pipeline today will get built because there's just no interconnect. And this interconnect, if the US wants to get to net zero, is estimated by EIA to be about $250 billion of investment by 2030 to hit the 2030 goals for renewable energy. That's not going to happen. And 2.4 trillion by 2050 to get to net zero. And so if you want to build a renewable energy project and get it financed, you have to have revenues in that project to get it financed. And having a Bitcoin miner that sits behind the meter that can consume that energy until you get an interconnect has huge benefits. And so renewable energy providers, their only other alternative is batteries. But if you're going to have batteries, you still have to have an interconnect to sell the energy. And so with Bitcoin miners, the energy companies don't have to invest any capital. And so we're this perfectly symbiotic partner for them. And so that's, and we're very happy to have been able to, do this in West Texas, where we sit behind a very large wind farm that otherwise had a lot of stranded energy. We're able to consume that energy, and then anytime the grid needs it, shed it completely. In North Dakota, that's also where we sit adjacent to a wind farm there. And our focus is very much to use renewable energy sources as much as possible, to not just incentivize the developers to build more of it, but also because we're very focused on obviously not wanting to increase the carbon footprint. And so now we're also looking at things like methane gas, not necessarily from oil fields, but more from landfills. Methane is 80 times more damaging to the environment than carbon dioxide is. And so we can capture the methane gas, convert it to carbon dioxide by generating electricity and then mining with it, we're adding a benefit.
Wow. Yeah, it's great to see that almost every type of renewable energy can be used symbiotically with Bitcoin as well. And it can solve all these inefficiencies. And I feel like that's a message that the world needs to understand and sort of flip the narrative on its head, that this is actually going to help people more efficiently use energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And I also was looking into just recently, Marathon made a campaign surrounding raising capital for the Bitcoin core developers. And I think, alongside Bitcoin mining, a lot of people don't really think about the core development of Bitcoin, or people that are actually coding and upgrading and working on the protocol. I'm curious on your take on, that initiative, and sort of what's the goals for continuing to work on Bitcoin, and how that will help miners and everybody in the ecosystem.
Sure. So many people don't realize that there are only a handful of people, really typically less than 10 core developers, who are focused on maintaining the integrity of the Bitcoin network, but also adding new features and enhancements. And they're not paid by anybody. They're not on salary by anybody. They basically get grants from different organizations, or they get contributions from miners sometimes. And, it's a tough job, because not only are they busy doing what they have to do, but, some of them have unfortunately gotten involved in legal cases where, the purported kind of people who believe that they are Satoshi and own copyrights to Bitcoin have been suing them. And, so they have to deal with those hassles. So we decided that we needed to do something about this. And it's one thing if we just do a contribution, but we wanted to really get the industry aware of what was going on, and get the broader kind of Bitcoin enthusiasts, if you would, focused on this. And so we looked at what organizations provide grants to the developers, and which one was kind of best suited for what we wanted to do. And we decided to partner with Brink, which is one of these organizations. And they basically provide grants to Bitcoin core developers, as well as providing them with other resources. And so we said that we would help them raise $1 million. We would match up to $500,000 every dollar that they could raise. And then at the Bitcoin Miami conference, we announced, we kicked this off, I think, on the Thursday, and said that, oh, by the way, any money that's donated during the conference will match 2-to-1 up to an aggregate of $500,000. And lo and behold, by the Monday morning after the conference, between our $500,000 match and what was raised, we were at $790,000, I think it was. So, very close to the $1 million goal. So obviously we're still asking people to continue to donate. And if I can just do a plug for that, it's
of course.
Brink, BRINK.dev/donate. So very simple. Please go there, click on it, donate whatever you feel you can. because it's really important for these Bitcoin core developers to get funding for the strength and health of the Bitcoin network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't know. There's so few, and yet to have to deal with the repercussions of other actors in the space is not good. And there should be, honestly, more decentralization, more people, have the ability to work on it. But as you said, they need grants and just like self-funded Bitcoin billionaires that can afford to do it without any pay, just out of their altruistic nature. I think it's important. And I've seen a few updates of like Taproot and security updates on Bitcoin that I know core developers have been working on. Is there anything with regards to Bitcoin mining or efficiency of the network that might relate to benefiting Bitcoin miners in the future that the core developers are working on that you know of?
Well, there are a number of initiatives specific to miners. You have really Stratum v2 and the rollout of Stratum v2, which is really more how pools and miners communicate with each other. That really is a focus on further decentralizing or deconcentrating, if you would, pools so that miners can essentially decide exactly on a machine by machine basis where they're going to send hash rate, how they're going to work, what blocks they're going to use. Mm-hmm. So it's really moving the decision making about what tasking a miner is going to do down to the individual miner level as opposed to at the pool level. So it's further ensuring decentralization, which is great. Mm-hmm. There are also a number of other enhancements that are being looked at, and I think Taproot was a very big step because it now brought the opportunity to start bringing smart contract-like capabilities into Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. You've seen lately with ordinals and these BRC20 kind of token initiatives that there's a huge amount of interest in trying to build Web3 applications on top of the Bitcoin network because it's the most secure network out there. And obviously other networks have issues because they're more centrally controlled. Mm-hmm. And even, the Ethereum network went offline for 25 minutes not long ago because of this concentration issue. And this is a core concern that even Vitalik has talked about relative to Ethereum. But in the Bitcoin world, ordinals and BRC20s, because they use the block space in each block, they essentially compete with financial transactions or Bitcoin transactions for that block space. And, at one point earlier this month, the transaction fees were greater than the mining subsidies. Some miners were getting over 6 Bitcoin per block in transaction fees, in addition to the 6.25 that they got in subsidies. So, the total block reward was, 13. In one case, I think it was almost 13 Bitcoin. That makes transacting very expensive, which is not good for adoption. So we're very focused in working with developers to develop applications at layer 2 and side chains where you don't necessarily need to use block space in Bitcoin for each of these items, like BRC20 tokens or ordinals, but rather you can store them at a layer above and then secure them using the Bitcoin blockchain, which is really what it should be. If you think about it, the Bitcoin network is very much like the internet. It's a very simple operation. The internet runs on TCP/IP. If you think about email, file transfer, web, everything else, those are protocols that run on top of the internet. Bitcoin should operate the exact same way. And I think one of the advantages Bitcoin has is its actual simplicity, in that it's simple in its base. And unlike Ethereum, which is a programmable network, Ethereum offers some great advantages to developers and innovators, but unfortunately maintaining the base layer becomes very complex because there's all this feature functionality in it. In the world of Bitcoin, you've abstracted all that to layer 2, and layer 1, the base layer, is basically just this very secure operation. And so I think over time, what's going to happen is you're going to find more and more applications migrating to the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin blockchain because of its security and because of its decentralized nature. And so I think we'll see that over time.
Yeah. No, there's no discussion around, Bitcoin is very decentralized, and to be able to host these applications, NFTs and ordinals, I think it's going to add value long term, and it is controversial because people don't like paying higher fees or if the network gets congested. But
Yep.
I don't think it's always going to be like that. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. And at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned the Bitcoin Halving, which I think is an exciting event, and usually the price becomes more volatile and more to the upside, hopefully, prior to that. We don't have a lot of time left, Fred, but what are sort of the main things that you're hoping to get out with Marathon in the next year leading up to the Bitcoin Halving?
So we're busily deploying a lot of hash rate. We ended last year around 7 exahash. We'll be about 23 exahash at mid-year this year. We're well on our way there.
Wow.
And then we'll add UAE in addition to that. So we're growing significantly in a period where very few other miners are growing at all. And so we're very focused on just deploying as much hash rate as we can. We had the benefit of being able to raise lots of capital when capital was inexpensive and easy to raise back in 2021. And so we've been deploying that last year, and now this year we're reaping the benefits of it. And I think anybody who looks at the mempool can see we're having an absolutely amazing month of production compared to prior month. So all that's beginning to benefit us and benefiting the Bitcoin network. And then we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to release new technologies. The development efforts we've done around firmware, controller boards, immersion, we're going to bring to market for other people to be able to benefit from that. Because again, the more people that can operate more efficiently, the healthier the network is going to be. And so we're very focused on doing that. And we'll continue to innovate and, hopefully over the next year, deliver some interesting technologies and products at layer 2 and side chains and other things, which I think, developers and people who really want to leverage the Bitcoin blockchain will find very useful for easing the friction that exists today to build applications and deploy them. At the end of the day, it's all about removing the friction so people can accelerate their efforts.
Yeah. Great. I'm looking forward to that, Fred. And I will leave the link to the Brink Dev donation in the description box below. If the viewers want to find out anything more about Marathon and follow along with these updates that you're talking about, is there any specific place that's best to learn more about this?
Sure. Just go to mara.com, MARA.com. Try to keep it as simple as possible.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, your insights into Bitcoin and the ecosystem. I really appreciate it, Fred. Let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Thank you, Ashton. Appreciate it.